Now, you've heard me talk about a time when I took a driving test, and the night before, I seemed to come under a massive attack of negativity, and it was all coming out of my own head. And it was a bit of a shock to me to think that something in me would attack my own progress. I was trying to do something good. It wasn't like I was doing something bad. And of course, I learned on that night the power of being able to stand up to something like that and making a distinction. In other words, I am one thing and these thoughts are quite something else. And by making the distinction, I was able to diminish them. Some years before that, while I was in Grandin prison, I didn't know what I was doing, but I look back and see it now. I've known for a long time, really, the dynamic of what actually went on there, why it was so powerful. And basically what it was all about was the fact that I knew that everything that, not just what the mind would think sometimes, and I was able to stand back from them and diminish that, but also I could stand back from the image that had been created and say, that's not me, that's not who I am. And making that distinction set me free from that identity, just like it set me free from certain thoughts. And like I've shared before, how many times do people reach the point when they just need to cross a certain point, a line, pass an exam, do a course, or whatever it might be, apply for a job, anything, and they just can't get there, and they're only held back by something within themselves. And what they've done is they've empowered the thought. They've given energy to just something that's just a thought. Or like I said before, it might be an emotional record that's starting to play. And here it is. And it's the past trying to gain power in the present and hold us back. And these things do happen. Now, what I'd like to talk a little bit about here is, well, that was great to set me free from that situation where I was imprisoned in a bad identity, which just set me free forevermore since. And on the eve of my driving test, I overcame that in the morning. It was easy to pass the test. But where does this all end? You know, where does this journey go? And of course, it goes to a place, there's a name for it, it's called non-dualism. And I don't expect you to understand that. And even if you thought you did understand it, it wouldn't be very helpful. The best thing to do is describe it. And it's been strange in my life because it's like as if I've experienced lots and lots of things, but I didn't know how I experienced them. And then I'd find that they were well written about by very famous people and things. And I'd picked up these books and think, well, that's what happened to me. And so I was able to put a definition upon them. And it's helpful actually finding definitions or finding some kind of central language for these things, because obviously we all need to be able to understand what we mean. A great example of that is like the ego. You know, usually people think when you talk about the ego, it's like egotistical, or someone's got a big ego or not a very big ego. But in this world that I'm talking about, the ego is the egoic mind, the mind that doesn't ask you permission to intrude upon your day, intrude upon your moments. It can be very negative. It's uninvited, it's out of sync, it's unhelpful, it's really not your friend, you know, it's just an absolute nuisance. And also, it creates a personality and won't let you move out of it, won't let you grow. And we talked about in another video about the glass ceiling, where you know you should be going higher in life, but there's something psychological holding you back, and it's the egoic mind. But when we learn to overcome these things, where does it all go? Okay, and I'll try to talk a little bit about that now. I went through a period in my life where I became very aware that any kind of fear, any kind of nonsense that would come up in my mind, I could see it straight away. It's like, whoa, like this, almost like learning to fight in the boxing ring. You learn to dodge and weave and all these sorts of things. And very much so in my life, I learned that there were spurious, I'd call them spurious thoughts, spurious ideas would come up. And they would try to gain some kind of traction, gain energy by me associating with them, thinking, oh, that's how I'm thinking, and oh, that's how I am today, and whatever it might be. and you can feel disappointed. But in actual fact, that is one thing and we are quite another. Now, it might be easy to say, well, that's what the thoughts are and that's what the emotions are. But what about the seer? What about the watcher? Who's that? And that is what we're looking for. That's the end of the journey. That's the Shangri-La, we might say. When we find out who we really are, the one who watches, the one who observes, the one who is not the ego. So I went through this period where I was very aware. And I remember writing about it in my second book, Another Kind of Knowing was the name of the book, where I said during this period when I was keeping fear at bay, it was like a standoff. So there was the fear. It was almost waiting, watching, but I was watching it. And so if anything arose, I was on it like this straight away. And I used to go for walks sometimes at night time. I love to look at the stars at night and everything. And just be, there's a little lane nearby. It's very quiet and very, very dark. And it's just lovely to see it all. And in the middle of winter, there's this great big field, and there used to be like clumps of mist, you know, because obviously the cold settles down. And the mist used to gather into clumps in the field. And in my imagination, I used to think that they were like the things in my mind that would like to interrupt me, that would like to encompass me, that try to get some energy from me, try to have their way. You know, spurious thoughts, spurious ideas, stupid things, you know. And I used to see them across the field, these lumps and things, and they used to sort of say, I've got my eye on you, you know. If you come across that field, I'm going to spot you, and I'm going to just keep my eye, and all I have to do is watch you. And because this is what we've learned, see, in life, you only have to make the distinction, and it diminishes them. But one of the things I didn't realize at that time was all the while that I was watching like these clumps of mist. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fool. They are not my mind, and they are not the ego, and they're not the things that come after me. They just were like a representation of them, which was helpful to me, for me to see. But I did have my attention on the fears and on the doubts and on these things that could come up and disturb me from the past. It's only from stuff from the past. Don't forget, the ego and the mind can only come up with things that have happened in the past. Maybe in a new version they come up with them. But what was happening all the time I was watching, something was going on. It wasn't just an exercise of watching. Something was happening and I didn't realize. And what it was is that let's imagine that all that egoic information that it could fire at me, that I could do, all that information's gathered somewhere. It's coming from somewhere. Well, the place where it was coming from was being destroyed. What was it being destroyed by? Being destroyed by my very attention to it. So the true self that I really am, who I really am, was watching it like this. And that's not nothing. Watching in this regard, being aware, being the watcher, being the observer, is not nothing. It's a powerful thing. Because the only power that these things have when they come, and you get these fears and doubts and all these ideas in your head, the only energy that they can get is from you thinking that, oh, well, that's how I feel today. And then it'll add another one and another one and another one. And it just gets worse and worse. And we just wonder, where's it coming from? Why do I do this? And like I said before, these things are unwelcome. We didn't give them permission. We didn't decide to think that way on that day. We'd much rather have a happy day, you know, but they cloud everything. So all these things have been diminished. And one day I was out in that lane and I had one of the most incredible experiences of my life, because I actually walked down the lane, and it was as if there's the area where all the mind life is, and I went past it, and I was walking in a place where there was no egoic mind, where there was no disturbance, where nothing existed in that way. When I get into the next video, I'm going to describe exactly what that was like and what it means. And in many ways, what is in store for all of us, because it's in all of us. And it's so marvelous. It's actually beyond belief. And when I had my experience, I didn't really know what to say to anybody about it because it's just so beyond, but it's marvelous. So join me on the next one.